Welcome back to another edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. I am Tim O'Malley, joined by Tim Priester of Irish Illustrated, John Bryce of Football Scoop, and Pete Sampson of The Athletic. And I want to turn it over early here to JB and Pete because Priester, we did a instant analysis via Zoom in the wake of Steve Angeli transferring out. One of them was going to go. It ended up being, and guys, we talked a little bit about how it started trending towards Angeli, but we didn't think it would have started there had you asked us back in October. I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that before spring, my thought was like Angeli would start the year and they'd eventually get to Carr. I also thought before spring that if there was one thing that could move the needle on this season, it would be Carr winning the job out of spring. And it's not like that happened exactly. But I think removing Steve Angeli from the equation for CJ Carr is like the biggest green light of green lights for where his development can go. So as far as Steve Angeli goes, like I, the last week of practice when we got that open practice and the blue gold game combined over essentially 8 days, it was just like he's not holding them off. It's just not going to happen. So credit to Minchie and Carr for really coming in, not just getting Steve Angeli, but moving past him. I thought that would happen eventually for Carr, but I did not. When spring started, I didn't think it would happen by mid-April. So credit to Minchie and Carr most of all for making that happen.
Yeah, I think it's got to be viewed as very liberating for Carr and Minchie, but especially for Carr. He's the quarterback who would probably be seen as most like Angeli. And then I thought it was really telling on Saturday. What was that? April 5th, when we had the open practice, and Marcus Freeman was asked after that practice about how feasible it was to carry a three quarterback battle into fall camp or something along those lines. And Marcus Freeman very directly said, you know what, it's probably pretty hard. We probably need to have it narrowed down to two by that point in time. And I thought that was the clear balloon being floated, that somebody was going to leave sooner rather than later. And what Carr did that day overall, not just the closing touchdown pass to Elijah Burris, but the off-platform throw to KK Smith, to some of the other things that he did. I thought that all of those things, coupled with the way he performed in the blue gold game, let it be known that Angeli was going to be the guy out. That he had stayed around this long for a singular chance to be Notre Dame's starting quarterback. And despite being the guy with his fourth spring on campus, he couldn't cement himself as at least the guy that would open preseason camp and presumably the season as Notre Dame's starting quarterback.
I thought when Marcus Freeman made that comment that day, that told me that it was going to be Carr Minchie. I mean I guess
That's a good point.
my instincts on that were correct. I don't really know, but um yeah, Pete, to your point, I mean the physical tools were just too great to hold off. And then Minchie threw his in to the equation as well, performing as well as he did when we had an opportunity to see him. So I don't know if Freeman, if he was trying to make a statement at that point regarding who it was, probably not. But I just got the feeling he said he wanted it to be a two-man race. I thought it was going to be Carr Mitchie at that point.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but when you spell out it's a two-man race during the race rather than how he kind of mentioned at the beginning of the spring and other coaches in January. Well, we know we're going to get down to two by August. We know that was always kind of like this is so far off. This is don't worry about it. Suddenly it became we got to get down to two because I don't want we can't
Yeah,
have real competition with three forever.
he went from like, let's not worry about this uncertain future, just worry
Yeah.
about today to like, we're gonna have two quarterbacks.
And you have to. You couldn't go and
Yeah,
you can't have a real training camp with a three
no.
quarterback race. If you do, you just don't have a quarterback. That's what that comes down to because you got to figure something out along the way. I believe we had our podcast. No, we did cover the Kennedy Erlacher transfer out.
You did mention that, yeah.
Yes, on Thursday. I guess the surprise, maybe not since they're still practicing this week. They finish up on Wednesday. That there hasn't been another one yet. It does make sense to wait until you've had all of your exit conversations, possibly after Wednesday. JB pointed out, technically, you'll still hear names until Sunday when the portal's technically Friday, but until Sunday, correct?
Yeah, Sunday, Monday, honestly. A player has through Friday to let the school know. The school then has 48 hours to enter that player's name officially into the portal. But if somebody enters the player's name into the portal at 8 p.m. Sunday night and people aren't necessarily scouring for it, then you might not hear some names until Monday morning. But yeah, Friday the 25th is the deadline. I think it's 5 o'clock. And then again, the school has 48 hours to enter that person's name into the portal after that time.
I would ask Pete and JB. So it's kind of an exchange between Notre Dame and USC. Notre Dame getting Elijah Hughes and USC getting Kennedy Urlacher. Who won that exchange?
Well,
I guess we don't know, but I mean, who do you think will win that exchange?
I would say Chad. I was going to say Chad Bowden won that exchange because he engineered both transactions. So
Very good.
how about
Fair
that?
enough. Fair enough.
Oh, so
I think it's
the
Notre Dame.
listenership to this podcast just fell off the table there, John.
I think it's Notre Dame. They don't listen to me anyway, Pete.
Yeah, okay.
They tune in for you.
Yeah.
No, I think it's Notre Dame. Sorry, Pete. I think I cut you off, but yeah, go ahead.
No, I will take a defensive tackle over a safety every day of the week. So
especially a rotational one. I mean, a rotational safety and a rotational defensive tackle.
Yeah, give me the. I mean, let's say Elijah Hughes is the fourth.
Yeah,
probably. Let's say he's the fifth defensive tackle. Kennedy Urlacher was the fifth or the sixth safety. So if their position in like the depth chart is the same, I will still take the defensive tackle.
Yes,
10 out of 10 times.
Yeah,
my view. Go ahead, JP.
Well, I'm sorry, Tim. What I was just going to tell these guys what we talked about on Monday was that, I mean, you look at Notre Dame's safeties room, and Stroman's going to be involved. Luke Telich took a huge step forward. Don Schuler's the leader of that group. We saw some good things from Tay Johnson. Jadon Blair and Ethan Long are longer than Urlacher. I mean, he's going to do some good things for USC, but yeah, I mean, he's got to compete against the USC. I don't know exactly off the top of my head what USC has at safety. I'll be getting into that more as we get into the summer, but he's going to have a hard time cracking that lineup too. USC always has quality safeties generally with some length.
He might be in line for sorry, JB. He might be in line for a little bit of an NIL bump as a reserve there and special teams starter there than he would be at Notre Dame, because you don't give NIL bumps to a returning sophomore. Is that fair to say, as opposed to a courted one?
Yeah, typically I would say that's fair to say, unless that sophomore was Jeremiah Love a year ago.
No, but yeah, not a rotational guy.
But yeah, I think Notre Dame right now on paper, so to speak, wins this trade. We'll be hearing a lot more of that over the course of this week with the NFL draft bubbling up and who wins trades and all of that. But look, D tackles are vastly more difficult to find and implement in a college system than safeties are. That's just the nature of the beast. In Hughes, you get a guy that's still got 2 years. I think that's significant. 2 years of a D tackle, a rotational D tackle, versus 3 years of Kennedy Urlacher, I think further helps Notre Dame, in my opinion, win this trade, this transaction, whatever you want to call it.
I also think, and I'm pretty sure I touched on this, you imagine Kennedy Urlacher. So we, just remember the Purdue game and how he played. And obviously he doesn't always practice like the Purdue game. But if this were 2014, Pete, with the safeties they had back in 13 and 14, and Kennedy Urlacher's leaving, we would have had an instant analysis, like immediate Zoom review of what is going wrong here. Whereas this time it was like, oh, shoot, I liked watching Kennedy Urlacher in that Purdue game. That is the result of Urlacher leaving. They have gotten better in the secondary. It would have been tragic 10 years ago if someone like that left.
Yeah, Ben Minnick's a smaller guy, but I mean, that's another guy. He had a great blue gold game. The competition there is just so great that if those are the kind of players that Notre Dame loses in the portal while it's still open, then great. And if it's a great opportunity for Urlacher, fantastic, go for it. He's a big time hitter, man.
Yeah. I feel like we're at a pot, like as soon as Notre Dame loses somebody who is in the two deep, I will be like, oh, okay, who's not a quarterback.
Yeah,
that's still going to happen, right?
So yeah, but it's just like it has. We're halfway through and it hasn't happened. So like, maybe we're talking about one or two guys, and that's like you guys have said this all the time, but like the depth on the team is to a point where you can lose. Like I like Kennedy Urlacher. I really felt
Sure.
like he had
Yeah.
an Elijah Shoemate type of ceiling to him. But the recruiting and development on the roster from top to bottom is so much better that it doesn't impact this season much at all.
Well, we can tackle that topic right now. Nobody else is left. Easter weekend probably helped a little bit with that at Notre Dame. Uh, Rumors and logic, either unfounded or founded rumors plus logic, would suggest that maybe defensive lineman, a running back, and a defensive back will enter the portal. I don't think people can argue with either logic or rumor there, right? Those are deep positions that have guys that can go and help.
For sure.
Do you think they would lose an unexpected guy, like an unexpected wide receiver at the bottom of the wide receiver group? Is there a linebacker? Because there's one linebacker like Preston Zinter could start many places. Other linebackers on this team could start many, many, many places. So that's where it kind of. Do you think there's going to be a loss where, as Pete said, a true ouch?
I mean, I feel like in the O'Malley over under assistants leaving that somebody will leave that Notre Dame's like, dang it. But like, let's just say if it's a defensive lineman, a linebacker, a running back, and this is just for the sake of discussion,
Right.
Those names are Payne, Zinter, Vernon. Well, that's not any different than Urlacher before in terms of guys who are outside of the two deep. If you're bubbling up to like an Osbury or something, then that's a completely different situation. But man, it seems like the roster and the program's in a good spot that people aren't looking for the exits if they're on the second team.
John, I jump in here because I think the area where there could be the most danger of losing somebody that you care about is a running back.
I would agree with that. And look, in talking with people in the program, there's an appreciation for Juwan Sider's direct approach, and that he said he doesn't play a whole lot of dudes. He's not going to have a number of different roles. He doesn't go into games really expecting to play more than three guys, at most a fourth guy if necessary. So I think people have appreciated that candor, but they've heard that candor, and that means there's definitely almost certain to be fewer footballs to go around in this iteration of Notre Dame's running backs room than the previous one under Deland McCullough. And I think the players, and definitely their families, I should note, are absolutely hearing that message, even if maybe Juwan Sider isn't meaning for them to hear it with that sort of resonance. They're hearing it that he's only going to play like his three dudes or whatever, unless there's an injury, and that's the way it's going to be. So, I would think the running back room is the one where you would say, oh, crap. Like Notre Dame, that guy could have helped Notre Dame win a game this year, or that guy would have started for Notre Dame 3 years ago or started for Notre Dame next year or whatever.
I want to throw into that. You know who else probably informed the running backs about how Sider's coaching style goes? Devin Ford, who was friends and teammates with all these running backs. And he left because he didn't have an opportunity, and he was told he didn't have an opportunity. Devin Ford certainly had conversations with Notre Dame's running backs when they hired his old position coach, who he had to leave because he didn't have an opportunity to play. So that would have come up as well. We had many, many, many draft questions we are not qualified to answer, so I thought I would throw them right here, guys. And this is part of our. It's not rampant speculation if you saw my tweet, but it is. It's kind of good, fun, educated guessing on our part. I think at this part, I don't know if you guys did a mock draft. I did not, but I'm just going to roll through these guys, and you say day 1, day 2, day 3, or undrafted. And as somebody said, is there a third iteration of the Tariq Bracy bet? You guys can let me know if Jordan Clark is involved.
No, not for
that
me.
was on Twitter.
No,
and
you're not going there, Tim.
No. I paid Sampson his $100.
Yeah, that's right.
But not since Jordan, especially since Jordan Clark measured at 5'9" at the pro day. I do want to mention Drew Mentok put together an excellent piece. Really thoroughly.
Yeah, we needed him on this one, actually.
Yeah,
he'll be on Thursday. We can talk about his piece then as well.
Yeah, really thoroughly covered all of these guys. There's unfortunately.
Well, Priest, you could try to place your bets by looking at Drew Mentok's coverage of it. There you go. See, you're using Irish Illustrated for your.
Unfortunately, no first-round draft pick for Notre Dame this year. And the guy that probably had the best chance it probably wasn't ever going to be Watts, because Watts Xavier Watts never, I mean, he doesn't test well enough probably to have been a first round pick. Ben Morrison, the injury, I think probably prevented him from getting there. Leonard Moore's age is preventing him from getting there. So it's second round for Morrison and Watts. I doubt that they fall beyond that round.
Yeah,
So early day two.
I was on a call with Chuck Oliver, Southern Sports Station, and he asked me a lot about Xavier Watts, and I was like, "You're getting a first round draft pick. He's just not going to be a first round draft pick because of the measurables."
That's
And
fair.
I don't want to butcher it from South Carolina. Did you see Nick Emanwari's testing at safety in the combine and his size? That is why a guy like Xavier Watts transitioning from college to the NFL, and safety's a devalued position a little bit, like running back was, can't go in the first round because there's guys running mid 4.3s that are 6'3", 225 pounds, and you're like, what the living day?
Yeah.
Now Xavier Watts, there's a good chance he'll be a better football player in the NFL, but when you have that and you think if you could coach that up, there's a lot. So Ben Morrison, we all say fell out. We're saying day two for Watts and Morrison, correct? Right?
Yes.
Yeah,
All
that's it. That's it for day two.
Kaiser, Mills, Evans, Leonard.
I
I've
think
got them all day three.
All day three?
Yeah.
and I think that's it. Like, to me, they'll have 6 picks.
That's my last question. If you had to pick one to get that will slip into round 7, would it be Cross?
It would be Collins for me.
It would be
Yeah, I
Collins
would go
for you?
Collins.
Yeah. He tested pretty well. He's got some good measurables. He's got the size. Cross has the college productivity, but he does not have the size that the NFL typically looks for. And the NFL loves putting players in a box even more than college programs, in my opinion.
One of the guys that Mentok used had Oben going in the 7th round, which I just don't believe. I think the real damn shame is Riley Mills, because he's
Yeah.
somebody's going to get a steal with him, and it's going to be delayed, obviously, because he's coming off an ACL. But it's really a damn shame that I who knows how high he would have gone, because he was coming on so strong at the end of his college career.
Probably like akin to Alex Bars or Capron Lewis Moore coming out, where they got hurt at the very end. Well,
Yeah.
Bars was midseason. KLM was literally at the very end.
The bitter end, the very bitter end.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think Bars was an undrafted free agent that felt like you were getting a 5th rounder for free.
Mhm.
I can't, was Capron going the 6th round? I can't remember, but probably more of a mid-round guy when he's healthy. So, somebody will get a 3rd round pick in the 6th round with Riley Mills. That's probably how I would look at that.
I'm going to give one shout out for Howard Cross here. If healthy, if that ankle stays healthy and all that, he will sign a second contract in the NFL.
Ooh,
I'm not
this
going
is the new
Isaac
Isaac
Rochelle.
Rochelle.
I did not do Isaac Rochelle. He will sign a second contract for year 4 in the NFL. Health is important in sports, however. That is tough. So we're going to finish segment 1, and I want to throw it over to Tim Priester. Eric Penick, great Notre Dame running back from the 70s and national champion, passed away. Priester, I know you're working on a piece on this with interviews included, but I figured you'd be best to speak on this. It was my brother Steve O'Malley loved Eric Penick. That was his range right there. It's one of the reasons he kind of fell in love with Notre Dame after moving from Nebraska. But I figured you could speak on this a lot better than the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about the great running plays in Notre Dame Stadium history, Eric Penick's 85-yard run in 1973 against USC, as great a coach as Eric Parsegian was, he had one hell of a time beating USC. But when he beat them, they won national titles. And I mean, that was not a game that I went to. I was 13, but I was glued to the TV for that and the 85-yard run. And yes, Tim, thank you. I spoke with Frank Pomerico this morning, and he and Jerry DiNardo and Steve Neese were leading the way. He also gave credit for Art Best throwing a great block on that run. But I mean, that's one of the great runs ever in Notre Dame Stadium history. And Jeremiah Love put his name on that list against Indiana this past December. But Eric Penick was I mean, he was lightning quick. He was a quality running back at a time when they had a bunch of other running backs. And the way Pomerico explained it to me was he had a tendency to run up the backs of us offensive linemen. He didn't always find the hole, but he had a monster hole on that 85-yard run. And it clearly was the highlight of his career. He ended up scoring a touchdown against Alabama in the Sugar Bowl and national championship as well. But Eric Penick was a great running back at a time when they had a bunch of running backs. Maybe didn't quite fulfill the promise that he had because he was so fast. But I mean that play, if you told me, from my days growing up in that stadium, what play epitomized, my life growing up in that stadium, it was Eric Penick's 85-yard run.
He might still be holding off Jeremiah Love for the best run in stadium history for people to remember because, Priester, you use these words. Are you ready? 85-yard run, USC, and national championship season. So that
Yeah,
makes it a big
exactly.
difference. No offense to IU, and just short of the national championship
Tim,
as well.
before we finish up this segment, if I could indulge people a little bit, I'm this Thursday heading to Minneapolis for Notre Dame Club of Minneapolis. Went last year. We have an event Friday night. It's at Morrissey's Irish Pub in Minneapolis. Starts at 6:30 Central Time, 7:30 Eastern Time. You don't have to fly in. But if you're around the Minneapolis area,
I
please
thought there was
join
about
us.
to be a Southwest deal you were going to
No,
promote
no, I
with
mean,
Irish
please join
Illustrated
us. And
subscribers.
and, and I want to say that, JB's got a hell of a deal with Football Scoop because look where the hell he is now.
That's a virtual background, but I am.
Oh, I thought for sure I thought for sure that's where you were.
I wish, but no, I'm. Yeah, I'm doing a little traveling, a little work, a little leisure as well. So.
On that note, we will be back with segment two, burning up the boards. But first, looking to upgrade your wardrobe? Founded by Notre Dame alum Go Wang, you've seen ESQ's custom clothing on the player walk and all of your favorite players and coaches. With more than a decade of making the best bespoke clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt, or bomber jacket, or that perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out esqclothing.com and book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention Irish Illustrated and get 10% off your entire purchase. That's esqclothing.com. See you soon with segment two, burning up the boards.
Segment two, burning up the boards. We start with a question from Henry Bede. Most of last year's playoff teams are adding rotational players in the spring portal. Is Notre Dame so far ahead of Texas, Ohio State, Georgia, etc., that they don't need to add players in the spring portal?
I'll go first here and just say, like, I've been told for months that Notre Dame was prioritizing reinvesting in its own roster and not looking to have to make a bunch of additions via the portal in this spring window. Again, the portal doesn't close until Friday. Notre Dame doesn't host its last spring practice until Wednesday morning, and then Marcus Freeman will kind of outline things after that about where the roster stands and what potential needs might be out there for the Irish. But I would contend that Notre Dame does really like the composition of its roster. It made some moves that it felt it needed to make in the mid-year transfer portal window, and I think that Notre Dame is pretty resolute in only adding if it believes it's truly adding real value to the roster and a real fit to the roster. I don't think we can overlook how much culture played a role in Notre Dame's run last year, and Marcus Freeman wants to be continually protective and accentuating that culture.
They got their work done early, is the easiest way to say it. I think that in hindsight, I wish they had been able to make it work with Max Clare, the tight end from Purdue that ended up at Ohio State. But other than that, like, I know Mosley went from Stanford to Texas recently, and maybe you could look at that and be like, oh, wouldn't that be a good fit for Notre Dame? And like, I guess, but
It'd be rotation,
he'd
right?
be a fringe player.
Yeah.
And like, unless you know somebody is leaving. So yeah, I think Notre Dame got their work done early. I'm just kind of looking over the 24/7 roster. I think Georgia took 9, Texas took 9, Ohio State I think took 6.
They're pretty.
Notre Dame's in that group, so I think that Notre Dame just got its work done early.
I think. Well, Tim, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think the one place it can hurt is if they lose a running back. That, I mean, unless they had to think they're going to lose a running back, there's no way they haven't planned on this, so they like their room if they lose a running back. The thing it could hurt is if, like Pete said, if you're at the highest level of Osbury or defensive end that you're not supposed to lose, then you're like, oh, shoot. We probably should have not been looking at the guys that are barely going to be able to help us at this point. But you can't prepare for everything anyway. You can't prepare for all these things. So I wouldn't fault Notre Dame in that situation, but it would be a spot where you're like, could have used a little more depth there. But Pete, that's a great point at tight end.
Yeah, Max
He would have
Clare,
helped
that's a
Notre
good
Dame a
call.
lot.
Yeah, that's a really
And
good call. The key, I mean, they can afford to lose one running back. They can't lose two.
right, great point. That's good. That's
And,
fair.
I mean, obviously that second one would be somebody that you covet. I'd still say Marshall Pritchett. Can they get a early entry freshman to Alabama to transfer to Notre Dame now? Well, you probably wouldn't do that now, but that's the only area really that I would say that they need another healthy body there because of the situation with Cooper Flanagan.
Related question kind of from Coach MDD via Twitter. What does optimal turnover look like? We'd love Urlacher level depth, but that's not realistic. Assuming retention of starters, how much depth is realistic, and does the New World Order put a premium on rookies able to immediately contribute? I think that's the most important part of that question.
Go ahead, guys.
Yeah, I would say like that this is optimal turnover. And like Notre Dame's sort of been in an optimal turnover state for a while now. I mean, I think even going back to like the end of Brian Kelly era, it's not other than the Logan Diggs, Buckner Styles like mass of departure,
Probably,
which
yeah.
frankly, Diggs was the only one of consequence there.
It
In
sounded
hindsight,
bad. It
yeah,
sounded bad. Yeah.
yeah, it was not a good thing at the time. And the turnover after the 24 season was not good optically with Flores and Merriweather leaving, and they're like, what the heck's going on in the wide receiver room? But again, in the end, didn't really make much of a difference. So I would they're in the optimal turnover zone right now, and it's I think a lot of programs would want to trade places with Notre Dame in terms of how the roster is being managed.
Yeah, I think the point about putting a premium on rookies being able to immediately contribute, I think we saw Notre Dame's approach to that this spring. I think we saw much more workload for some of those younger guys. I think we referenced it in last week's pod about the workload that a Kedron Young and even Nolan James got in the spring game, and some of the work that those guys and younger players got on special teams over the balance of spring. It will be that way when preseason camp opens at the end of July. What's being consistently told to me is that spring camps, spring practice is becoming closer and closer to OTAs, and you're absolutely having to re-recruit your roster. Now, it's worth noting that I talked to a number of coaches. They're really pushing very hard for a single portal window. So
That'd
there's
be
no
hugely important. Yes.
there's no definitive movement on that yet, but I do want to note that like even last week when I was at Ohio U and for Football Scoop and spent the entire day with all their staff, and that was a recurring theme. Another GM that I talked to late in the week, maybe Thursday or Friday when I was beginning to travel, was saying the same thing. We have to get to one. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of FCS coaches would like that one portal to be in May, and whereas all
Yeah.
every FBS person or staffer that I've talked to wants that portal to be either in late December or the first January 2nd through January 12th, something
Right.
like that, a 10-day window, and then still the exceptions for the playoff teams where you
Right.
get 5 days after your season ends. But I should
Well,
note, as we discuss this topic, that there's a stronger push than ever to have a single portal window, and they want it down to 20 days, if not just 10 days.
yeah. Wow, that would be great. December or January. I think what would happen, more guys, if you're going to reduce it from 2 to 1, more guys are going to go in the portal at that time. Maybe a few more end up coming back because of that. I don't know. I'm just trying to project in my mind, but yeah, well, yeah, I'm sure FBS isn't going to want it in May.
No, you lose your. Well, I mean, that's the issue right now. So let's say Notre Dame has invested all this money in Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, defensive backs, defensive lineman, CJ Carr, their backup Kenny Mitchell and CJ Carr. What happens when someone's agent for a starting player wants more money for that player at the end of April because he's so much more important than, like, not everybody can be paid exactly what they're worth yet at Notre Dame, right? You could find somebody that was really good last year that thinks he can get more or absolutely can get more. And that's what makes the second portal window dangerous for
Ooh, boy.
Yeah, that's what makes it, because then you lose
Yeah.
if you lose a guy now, that's a lot worse.
Yeah.
An
Yeah.
important guy, a very important guy.
The
No
players
doubt.
have much more leverage
Yeah,
in the two window world than they would in the one. And it may be time for something to move in, like a check in the for the programs and the schools opposed to the players.
Yeah,
'Cause
the pendulum has swung
the players are on
one
like a
direction.
27 check winning streak here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we'll see. One other thing to note is that in that scenario, or if that gets pushed through, you could still have spring graduate transfers. So you would still be able to enter the transfer portal if you were a spring graduate and you had like a year or two left to play ball somewhere else. That wouldn't be defined by the portal window, which is the way it is
that's
now.
good. That's good because that's Steve Angeli. First of all,
Yeah,
I mean,
that should stay. Like if we're really going to be giving lip service to like you should get your degree. If you do, then
yeah,
you should be free to do what you want.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
then to the players being on a winning streak, they are on an unchecked winning streak overall. And Lane Kiffin talks at length about it. The linebacker, I think Crowder, that played for Florida and then played a number of years in the NFL, had Kiffin on his podcast and
Jamie
was
Crowder.
talking,
Yeah,
and was talking the other day about how you're telling me, and he lives in Miami. He's like, you're telling me down the street, Miami paid Carson Beck $4 million. My best year I ever made was $6 million, and that dude made a couple of Pro Bowls. So it is a bit unchecked. But for a guy like Nico Iamaleava, he's taking a pay cut going to UCLA. He misplayed his hand.
yeah, which is fun.
But yeah, it's amusing for sure. But he had Miami wanted him before it wanted Carson Beck back in December, and Oregon had interest in Nico back in December. Then when Nico said no, I'm sticking with Tennessee, and we're going to get things fixed, and they're going to give me a new deal, and didn't get his deal. He reached back out to Oregon, and then Oregon reached back out to Tennessee and said, "Hey, this guy still tells us he's available, FYI." And now you see him signing for way less money in a program in disarray.
Question from DHS Spartan 1985. Well, this may not be topical by the time the podcast launches. Should Steve Angeli consider Stanford as a destination? He could get playing time and one of the best graduate degrees available. Also being coached by Frank Reich and have access to Andrew Luck wouldn't hurt.
It's a great idea.
It is a great idea.
Yeah.
You just know though that I mean, like when I heard Angeli was entering the portal, I'm like, okay, which one of the opponents that Notre Dame plays this year is he going to go to?
Well,
And sure, and there it is. Those are two. That's
it's a possible more dangerous one than Stanford or Purdue too, because I mean, I don't think there's a storyline if Steve Angeli takes a visit here to Syracuse and goes to Notre Dame and plays on senior day at Notre Dame, like it's with a viable team. He goes to Stanford. It's great job, Steve. We're rooting for you forever. Purdue, it's hey man, way to keep that thing more closer than it was last time. If Notre Dame's tired at the end of the year and they have one loss and they absolutely cannot afford a loss, and here comes a much better Zach Frazier. No, I know. I don't think it would happen, but there's a storyline for writers if Steve Angeli goes to Syracuse.
Yeah, I just think that the Stanford, while it on the surface makes a lot of sense and you make good points, look, Mosley just transferred out of there. The D lineman that TP loves is transferred out of there. Their roster wasn't great to begin with. They're coming off back-to-back 3-9 seasons. And so, like, if you were looking at this as transferring to Stanford and it was the start of the Troy Taylor era and you thought that program had a chance to turn around sooner rather than later, to me it would make sense. But in this scenario, Syracuse is coming off a 10-win season. Kyle McCord was lights out for the Orange. That makes a lot more sense to me than a Stanford.
Next from Aerofan 624. Does Notre Dame have a contingency plan if the House settlement by some long shot gets rejected?
Yes,
John, why don't you go ahead and address this? Because, I mean, a contingency plan would be same as it ever was, right? So I wouldn't think that there would be much of a.
Well, they're over. That'd be way over right now.
Well, yeah. Well, okay. Well, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, like if I was told this past week that Notre Dame has a plan for both scenarios to carry a roster of 105 for the fall based on the House settlement passing, and to have a roster of up to 120 if the House settlement somehow does not pass or there was a grandfather clause enacted into that. However, I want to read this text that I got over the weekend from a GM in college football. And he knew I was traveling, so he's like, "Hey, hope you arrive safely. Your information is pretty up to date. I was told today that it looks like the 105 max is going into effect in August. There will be no grandfathering process." So at the end of last week, college football GMs were being told, prepare for 105 at August and no grandfather process. That echoed what a couple of other GMs had told me earlier last week. So I'll be at the DFO meetings in Dallas in 10 days or so and be there for 3 days. And there's usually some pretty good information coming out of that. They usually have pretty good line of intel on rosters and things of that nature. So should have some more clarity by then, although they continue to expect that Judge Wilkin will approve the House settlement and that they'll hear sooner rather than later. There was a groundswell of belief that she would rule by this past Wednesday. She did not, but there's hope that she will rule this week and that it will be the passing of the House settlement. But to be clear, Notre Dame specifically told me last week, we have a plan in place for both. In terms of what that means monetarily, as you said, TP, it would mean funding from NIL again, the true NIL fund, which has been moved in-house that I think Scott Connor now runs, rather than using the fund, which has been de-emphasized and really gone away. And so that's what Notre Dame would have to do if there's not the House settlement. If there is the House settlement, Notre Dame is opting in as a full participant at about $20.5 million. And that's, again, I need to stress, that's not money that Notre Dame gets from a magic pot somewhere or anyone else. That's money that Notre Dame has to earmark from its budget or raise anew or find from other areas in its budget.
We have a question from Matthew J. Bowles. What real quarterback competitions have been your favorite to cover? Did any of them really surprise you when the starter was announced?
Go ahead, Pete.
I mean, Reese Chris Hendricks was kind of interesting from early on BK because we didn't really know where like BK was going to go with it, and I think even made some remark about like, if you can't move, you can't play quarterback for me, and like, well, Hendricks is going to win it. It's like, well, no, actually, not at all. And obviously
Make that comment. You're right. That's good.
Yeah, that competition played out over 2 years, really. So yeah, I mean that was fun. Like, but like the Zaire Kaiser one was just annoying.
Yes.
Like,
oh god, it was.
If you can eliminate like the unnecessary like cloak and dagger elements of quarterback competitions, usually they're enjoyable to cover. When coaches sort of try to out-cute themselves, that's when it gets annoying.
I want to bring this up because I know Priester's going to go back a little further. I want to bring this up in quotes because Pete, you mentioned the Hendricks one. We had our first clue that Hendricks wouldn't start when Brian Kelly said in a press conference he's starting to understand down and distance. Pete and I looked at each other and thought, not a great situation for a junior quarterback. So we didn't think Hendricks would start at that point. And of course, our great friend Lou Emoji summed up the Golson Zaire competition in the spring. That was a true competition in the spring when Everett Golson ghosted all of us for interviews on the last day. John Bryce, his storyline, his headline, "Silence is Golson." At that moment, every single writer was like, "Damn it!" I could have come up with that one.
He knows I'm still pissed at him that he came up with that.
My least favorite one was Buckner and Pine because it didn't seem like it was going to be all that fun no matter what.
Yeah,
that was a bad one.
That's a good point. That's the only one at Notre Dame that I have any depth to speak on. I will say my favorite was in 2004. I covered at Tennessee the Eric Ainge, Brent Schaefer QB battle, and I forget there was one more.
Was there a Clausen there?
Maybe Rick Clausen at that time, but there was because Casey was gone.
Yeah.
But there was it was unheard of for two true freshmen to be battling for the starting QB spot. And then Ainge ended up winning it, but Philip Fulmer had never played two quarterbacks in his life, and he went into the season with a two-quarterback system and played it through the first several games. And Schaefer was so electric and dynamic, and Ainge was the more prototypical passer. And that's, of course, the year that Tennessee started off great in 2004, and then Notre Dame late in that year ruined Tennessee's season
Inexplicable win. Inexplicable win
when,
by
when
Tyrone
Philip
Willingham.
when Philip Fulmer continued to be out of character and sitting on a lead on about his own 30 with 40 some seconds left, decides he's going to get aggressive, and Eric Ainge throws a pick and breaks his collarbone, and there you go.
I remember I mean, Tony Rice, Terry Andresiak, that ended up working out.
Pretty well.
I mean, yeah, it worked out. It worked out pretty. I mean, there was no doubt that Lou Holtz wanted Tony Rice to get up to speed so he could insert him, and it ended up going right. Andresiak was injured and ended up going, Rice's way. But that was a situation where it was just, I just need to get my guy in there, and we know great things are going to happen. That's why Lou Holtz went the extra mile to get Tony Rice into Notre Dame. We have a question from Manentai, and that is, Notre Dame's defense certainly sounds like it has depth and elite playmakers at every level. Is it fair to say that Chris Ash will need to produce a top 25 defense to be considered successful, or does the departure of key veterans provide cover for him in his first year? No coordinator gets cover.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, what depends on the stats we're using here, but like
Yes.
I think we would describe Notre Dame's defense last year as top 5. So if this year was top 25, I think that would just sort of be okay. So I would sort of agree with Manitai here. Like if this defense isn't a top 25 defense, something went wrong.
I agree.
Yeah, I would think also, are you looking at top 25 total defense or top 25 scoring defense? If they're
Scoring defense. Yeah.
right, if they're top 25 total defense, but they're top 15 scoring defense, I think that's a pretty good debut season for Chris Ash. If they're not, then I think, yeah, with the talent that we all believe that they have coming back, and the new additions, and yeah, they've lost a lot, but they bring back a lot and they have a lot, then yeah, I would agree with the questioner.
I'd say Miami, A&M, USC, Boise, Syracuse. Who am I missing? Arkansas. Chris Ash gets out of those games, and Notre Dame didn't give up more than 23 points. Chris Ash did a good job. Doesn't really matter if they hold Navy to 0 or 12 or 19 these days. It doesn't matter what happens when you're playing Purdue. It's the teams that can get you. Like, I think one of Al Golden's defenses gave up 24 to the worst Stanford team you've ever seen out there, because it was just a crazy.
Yeah, and it didn't matter.
That doesn't matter at all.
Yeah,
it's those games. That's how I think that is exactly how I will judge Chris Ash. Did you keep the points down in the games that are supposed to be competitive?
Most first-year coordinators have sorry, JB. Most of them have a transition in their first year. Now, Chris Ash has been very careful to say, hey, we're not reinventing everything here. We're going to pick up where we left off with Al Golden and just enhance. But still, there is always a bit of a transition. But I agree with you, Pete. I mean, this better be a top 25. It better be a top 15 defense. They have the ability to do that. However, you do lose a lot of veterans, and you just can't discount that, especially number 24 in the middle of the defense. You got the playmaker on the back end, the two difference makers on the interior defensive line. But yeah, they have a ton of ability. They've got depth. They still have Mike Mickens. They should be very, very good, and I think that they will. But a little bit of transition. There'll be moments where we say, hey, still a little bit of transition with Chris Ash.
Yeah, and I am curious, and we've hit on it before in previous pods this spring. I am curious to see, they've talked about mixing coverages, so I am interested to see how much they use zone coverage in the fall. But they certainly have worked on it substantially enough over the balance of this spring camp that it seems to be something they believe they will be able to deploy with some effectiveness in the fall. As we continue our questions here from VA Doc 88, with the hope of a 15 or 16 game season again for 2025, what changes in approach, if any, are necessary along the offensive line to get guys ready for 75 or 80 starts? Which positions along the OL seem to have the most reliable depth?
In good health, Gerby Lambert, Knapp, and Wagner and Jagasa are all tackles. Jagisa, Schroff, Absher are all guards. Craig and Absher are centers. Do you need an eighth? I think seven's pretty good there. I mean, Wagner's pretty obvious. If I didn't state Emil Wagner, I meant to. But do you need? I don't know of an eighth because if you say Will Black, you're just speculating because he's ranked higher.
Yeah, it could be Matty Augustine, who was here early, but had that really bad rep that we can't get out of our minds from the
I,
blue gold game.
I think Will Black's the guy. People are like, do we have
Yeah,
another one on the way here? But that's a good question because that's 15 or 16 games, not 4 games.
Yeah, and I mean, look, if Schroff doesn't get hurt, if Craig doesn't get hurt, which is like, okay, you could say that about anybody, they would have had 4 offensive linemen play 975 snaps
Yeah.
last year. So this is I don't know if this has as much to do about 15 or 16 game season as it does just like you could get injured in game 3. And
But
then
you
got
get to game 13 like they did. Those linemen got hurt in game 14 too.
Yeah, there was, the Tosh Baker, Rocco Spindler type stuff at the end. Yeah, it's where a season-ending injury for Jagasa turns out to not be a season-ending injury. So I guess I wouldn't say you really need to change a whole lot. You just need to hope that you stay healthy.
I don't think Lauren Lando, I'm sure he has ideas as to how he wants to, we know we've talked about this, how he wants to handle the potential of a longer season. You just don't, you know what you need? You need to avoid a lineman falling on a guy's foot that's, when he's on the ground. A lot of it is, I don't know that it's preventable. It's just football. And sometimes it happens, especially with linemen with trees falling around you.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame is working on a different approach, and we saw it with the way that Notre Dame delayed the start of its spring camp. We saw it with the way that they talked to us about staggering into rotation, the way the guys attacked the offseason, the winter conditioning program, and I think we'll continue to see that. So we know that Marcus Freeman and John Waggle and Lauren Lando and all those folks have really plunged into the sports science and believe in it, and this is going to be the approach moving forward.
Question from Jim Booney, CRS. Jeremiah Love was practicing at wide receiver last spring and fall camp, and he never really played a legit wide receiver or wide receiver snaps at all during the season. How much stock do you put into the notion that he was again practicing at wide receiver this past spring? What do we know about his wide receiver skills? Would he be the best wide receiver on the team if he were to switch positions today?
I want to go to Pete because we did a little bit of this with, I think it's NFL related for Jeremiah Love.
That's exactly what I was going to say. This is a resume enhancer for Jeremiah Love. I don't think it really impacts Notre Dame's offense a whole lot this season.
He would not be the best receiver, right?
No, and he wouldn't be the best receiver on the team. I think he'd be good.
Yeah,
but he's a great running back.
Yeah,
he's not really running intricate routes, right? I mean, he's lining up in the slot, and they're just trying to get the football in his hands.
Yeah, it's like the get the ball to player in space thing that college offensive coordinators do, which makes sense. Yeah, I do that too.
Exactly that. I still think Jaden Greathouse is the best pure wide receiver on the team right now, so I don't think it would be Love. He would be a very good wide receiver. I would say that maybe we actually see it a little bit this fall because Notre Dame is going to have a better, more proven offensive line, and it's going to seemingly have a much more throw-first quarterback than what it had in 2024.
And maybe because he hasn't played the position much, the second time through, going through the concepts and some of the things, they may be able to do a little bit more with him just because he's had, more practice reps doing
it's
it.
Year 2. It's spring number 2 of doing this.
Right, exactly. And as great as he is, even a Jeremiah Love needs a little bit of time to learn a new skill set. But, again, it's not intricate routes that he's running. It's get off the line of scrimmage, let us get you the football and do what you do, Jeremiah Love.
So last year he averaged essentially 1.5 catches per game. Like, could he have, I think, 2 catches per game
I agree. It's just, does he
Two and a
have one
half.
catch?
Like,
Does he have one catch against Miami that's a slant that goes for 87 instead
yeah,
of instead of the slant that goes to Great House that goes for 29? I mean, there's a difference. There's where there's a difference. He's the
yeah.
best wide receiver on the team when he has the ball running forward already in his hands.
Yeah.
Our next question from ND Dan 106. Notre Dame has a first-year defensive coordinator, a first-year starter at quarterback, questions at wide receiver, injuries at defensive end, and unproven production at defensive tackle. While Notre Dame has very good strengths, what gives us confidence that a 10-plus winning season, particularly with the competitive schedule, is likely?
Go ahead, guys.
I mean, they're really freaking talented. I, I, I just don't know other way to say it. Like Notre Dame has a lot of material to work with. Everyone in the country has questions. Notre Dame's questions. I mean, quarterback aside, because you just need to see it on a Saturday from C.J. Carr and Kenny Minchie. The rest of it, wide receiver, DN, D tackle, like I don't really have a whole lot of questions about those positions.
Yeah. Look, Texas is going to have a first year full time starter with Arch Manning this year and replacing a number of key guys on the offensive line, a top wide receiver, a top safety, a top defensive lineman. Ohio State obviously is going with a brand new starting quarterback and a new defensive coordinator, and all replacing two starting running backs, a number of players off of its offensive line. Jack Sawyer on the defensive line. Tuiala, yeah, that guy,
That guy.
44.
JTT.
Yeah, JTT off the defensive line. Key linebackers. Look at Ole Miss last year. They didn't make the playoffs. They spent boatloads of money. They're going to replace Jackson Dart now, who's expected to probably be a second round draft pick. A number of defensive linemen, including Walter Nolan and Prince Uyamanliane, as two of their best players, and playing also a very difficult schedule like Notre Dame. So I just think that this question is certainly very valid and very fair. I think it's more emblematic of where we are pretty much overall in college football. I just don't think there's going to be very many days where there's a third and fourth year starter and you have stability everywhere. Not in the current system.
My reaction to the question was the same as Pete's. They're good, man. They're good. They've got talent everywhere. They have depth.
Right.
Everybody's going to have injuries. We saw last year that their depth shined through when they did have injuries. The things they were able to accomplish on their offensive line in postseason with what happened. They're good, man. Their roster is loaded with talent.
Fairness to the question is last year with Watts, Kaiser, Cross, Mills, preseason, and Riley Leonard, and a crap schedule, we were sitting here right now and said they are going to go 11-1. They better go 11-1. Now you can at least say, well, they're going to be tested some more games than they're going to be tested more games, and they don't have if right down the middle matters the most, they don't have Xavier Watts. I'm not going to say Jack Kaiser because he's very important, but they have a pretty good guy replacing him in the middle of that defense, number 27 or number 34, I think. But Xavier Watts matters. Xavier Watts matters in September this year. I think Xavier Watts will matter in September of this year at one point. Does that make sense? What
Well,
I'm saying,
when you open at Miami and then your second game's Texas A&M,
yeah,
good Lord,
that's why
who's doing
I
that?
think he was pretty darn good.
Yeah, I mean, so like we all agree, like if they split the first two games, it's not the end of the world. Like,
No,
isn't
it's
that
true.
isn't that the most likely outcome?
It wasn't last year. It somehow.
Yeah, right.
Should
It,
have been.
it would seem to be that, Pete, right now. Yeah, I mean, that's a tough ask, man. That's a tough
Yeah,
ask. There's no doubt.
I would say that might be the most likely outcome if they didn't have that open date in between the two of those. I do think that's significant.
It
So.
really is. That would easily be the most likely outcome if they didn't have an open date because you're just coming back from. Well, first of all, they couldn't play on Sunday against Miami. That would be a really bad call on Notre Dame's part to do that. But yeah, I think the open date does help there.
All right, we're going to wrap up with a question from ND Quebec. Can you name a few teams that have won a national title with a first-year starting quarterback?
I can name two that beat Notre Dame to win the national title with the first-year starting quarterback, though they were a little different. In Mac Jones, a senior, and Trevor Lawrence, who people might remember was a first-year starting quarterback. He was good at that. Most of the I think it's like almost every year. I did a quick look. I mean, Barrett and Jones were first-year starters when they won it. Wasn't Coker a first-year starter, JB, for Alabama? Like his only year
Yes,
starter type
it
thing?
was exactly. And then I
Um,
think Ohio State in 2014
yeah, Barrett and
was,
Jones. Yeah.
Cardale
well,
Jones. Yeah.
yeah, Cardell
Ah,
was down. That was their third
third
string
string.
Yes.
for the
Yeah.
playoffs. Maybe for the
Is there
Big Ten
Steve Angeli?
championship.
So without Notre Dame losing Angeli means they can't win it if they lose
Yeah.
both their starting quarterbacks on the way. That's terrible. All right.
Yeah, I
I mean,
think
it
somebody
happens.
on the message on your message board maybe said something effective like this team is built to have a first year starting quarterback have success. And I sort of agree with that. Like returning OC, very, very talented offensive line, Love and Price. It'd be great if you had a Michael Mayer at tight end, who was a little bit more established, but it's a pretty good platform to stand on for a first year starting
Yeah,
quarterback.
I think the offensive line coupled with the running backs is the most significant right there. And I think I mentioned that Tim Monday that Marcus Freeman looks at this as, if you're ever going to start a young quarterback, you want it behind this offensive line with that brilliant running back behind CJ Carr.
I mean, now that I
And
think about this, like, wasn't Jameis Winston a first-year starting quarterback? He was a redshirt freshman. He won the title. Yeah, he was a first-year guy. I know it's Jameis Winston's a little different at starting quarterback than most people, but he was. Was
Still
Jalen
playing
Hurts
in the
lost?
NFL.
Jalen Hurts lost the title as a true freshman. I think Notre Dame fans could live with another 15-1 season if they have to. Fromm was a redshirt freshman, right? He went to the
Yeah.
playoffs. Was
then
Yeah,
Fields?
I mean his first start was at Notre Dame.
Yeah, Justin Fields was was he a redshirt freshman? He's a transfer, so he might have been a redshirt sophomore. He didn't start. Justin Fields had never started. I mean, most of these guys were first year guys. That's how we look at it, right? Was it Milrow
Yeah.
in the playoffs? He was a first year starter.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of them when you think about it.
Yeah, the key is having a really good quarterback.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
mean,
we
all these
think
teams. I
Notre
just
Dame
named really good
does.
teams, by the way.
Yeah.
Too.
Well, and Notre Dame also has a splendidly talented defense to help break in a new starting quarterback as
Right.
well.
Was J.J. McCarthy a first year? The first year they went to the playoff and lost.
I don't
Maybe he was a second year
I think
starter.
he had, I think he
he
had,
Second.
played
he'd been
significant.
on
He
again.
played so
option.
much that
Yeah.
doesn't count. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of them. Jamel Holloway too. If you want to go back 40 years, does that count, guys? So we're going to do Jamel Holloway as a first year starter. But I think no. I mean, this is a lot of examples from the playoff era. I totally forgot Jameis Winston, but he definitely was a redshirt freshman quarterback when he did it because he won the Heisman, and you were worried he was going to win like 3 Heismans in a row if he stayed, and it all went.
Yeah.
Of course, didn't happen that way. But there's a lot of them. A lot of guys. At least we named a lot of guys that make the playoff too, and that's a successful season for CJ Carr or Kenny Minchey, in my opinion. It's not. I mean, that's can't always win a national title, as we figured out. All right, that is it for today's edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. We have Marcus Freeman on Wednesday. That is Notre Dame's final practice. That will lead into our Thursday, April 24th podcast, where we'll talk a little bit about the draft, but mostly about what we talk to Marcus Freeman about. And there will be portal questions, I'm sure, and it could get very active. I'm sure the Irish Illustrated Insider curse will, in fact, be in effect on Thursday when we finish, because that will be the beginning of Notre Dame's final portal entries. For Tim Priester of Irish Illustrated, John Bryce of Football Scoop, Pete Sampson of The Athletic, I'm Tim O'Malley. Thanks for listening to this edition of Irish Illustrated Insider.